another important New York theater company, part of the fabric of New York theater. What makes New York theater New York theater? It's the Mayi Theater Company. Ralph Peña is with us and his group. And I hope they are all with us. Can you all hear me?
Yeah. Yes.
Hi, fantastic. 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 So welcome. And we are already in the second half of our event, the New York Actors for Ukraine, expressing that crisis in Ukraine, the war is in our mind. And I would like to really thank you for helping us right away. Ralph was the first who answered, actually, when I sent out the inquiry. He said, of course, and I think he wrote, how can anyone say no to participate? So Ralph, tell us a little bit about your company for all those who do not know about it, and why is that so close to your heart?
Well, my theater company is now in its 33rd season in New York. We're New York based, but our mission has been to develop, promote, and produce new plays and performance works written by Asian American playwrights. So we have centered Asian American lives in our company since we began, and now in the pandemic, we've sort of reorganized and reassessed who we are and what we need to do. And in the midst of anti-Asian violence that is on the rise in New York, one of the realizations we've had with talking to our communities, that's been facilitated by Nancy this past year, theater is not what our community needs at the moment, which they're very concerned about safety. And I think our role as artists is to respond to that, and maybe not through theater, but to direct service. And that for us resonates with what's needed in Ukraine. Theater serves one thing, but it doesn't have to be just that. We can become other things for our communities in times of crises. And I think that's what's happening now. And we want to talk about that with Ken, Leung, and Jacob, and Jesse, and Nancy, of how a cultural organization can change when the needs of the communities change, and how you reprioritize your mission, where art is still there, but right now what's needed from us is to make sure that our people aren't getting hurt. So what's happening in Ukraine resonates with us. I also come from the Philippines, and we'll talk about this later, where militarization has been in place since the Marcoses regime in the 1980s. And today, that's still very much in place. And there are indigenous tribes that have been subject to militarization and bombings and salvagings, meaning people are killed. So what we've done, we have a poem written by a student from one of these tribes, an open letter to students in Ukraine. And yes, so that's what we're going to start with, Martin.
Okay, thank you.
Should we, does everybody want to please introduce themselves first? Nancy?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Nancy Bulalacao, and I am the community outreach liaison for Mayi Theater, and I worked with them on their past this past show at the Public Theater, The Chinese Lady.
Mm-hmm. Jesse?
Hi there, my name is Jae Hoon. I'm an associate with Mayi Theater Company. It's so great to be with you here today. Jacob?
Hi, my name is Jakob Carter, they, them pronouns, and I am very excited to be on this panel to discuss this today. Associate producer with Mayi Theater Company, and I'll pass this along to Ken.
I am Ken Leung, and I'm an actor. I've been associated with Mayi since the mid-90s. So I'm a longtime friend of the theater company.
Thank you. Great. Thank you. Thank you all for taking time on this holiday weekend, actually. So really, thank you.
Right. So we're going to start with this poem. And this poem, again, was written by a poet in the Philippines, from the Philippines. It is a letter, liham ng estudyanteng lumad sa mga kapwa estudyante sa Ukraine, a letter by a student, indigenous student, tribal indigenous student to her fellow students in Ukraine. And it's written by Joy Barrios. Okay, I'm going to read it first in Filipino and then Ken will read it later in English. Mahal na mga kapwa estudyante, nakita ko ang inyong larawan, nakabuklat ang mga aklat, may naggugupit at may nagkukulay, may nagdidikit ng larawan sa papel, mga mag-aaral sa panahon ng digmaan. Napahanga ako sa inyong paghahanda sa anuman ang maging mangyari, sa anumang sandali. Tatlong maiksing pagtunog ng kulingling at ang ibig sabihin ay may sunog. Mahabang senyas ng kampanilya, ang hudyat na baka may nahulog na bomba. Ang husay sa leksyon ng pagmemorya ng mga pananda ng panganib na nakaamba, ang magtatakda ng buhay at kamatayan. Yan ang aming natutunan nang sinunog ang aming paaralan at pinaslang ang aming mga guro. Pandadarahas ang tugon ng pamahalaan sa katutubong tumututol sa minahan ng dayuhan. Sa labanan ng mga kapangyarihan sa daigdig, tayong maliliit ang naiipit. Huwag sanang pagtakhan kung bakit ang aral na nakaukit sa isip at dibdib ay tapang na magtanggol, maghimagsik, sukdulang buhay ay mabuwis.
My dear fellow students, I see your picture. One is opening a book, another is clipping paper, someone else is using crayons. I see you putting stickers on paper. We are students in the midst of war. I am very impressed by how prepared you are for anything that might happen at any minute. 3 short bursts of sirens means there is a fire. The long continuous pealing of church bells means a bomb is on its way. These are worthy lessons to memorize. They are reminders of imminent danger. They also mean the difference between life and death. These are the lessons my tribe learned when they burned our homes and killed our teachers. We understood that violence is the favorite language of governments, especially against native peoples protesting against the mining operations of foreigner corporations. In the wars of the world's most powerful, we are the small, dispensable pawns trapped in the middle. So don't wonder why the lessons carved into our hearts are those of rising up and defending our rights. It might spell death, but we will fight until it equals freedom.
Thank you, Ken. And thank you, Joy, for that poem. As we were preparing for this, we wanted to take a conversation that is sort of pressing for our communities here, because I think that's what we can talk about.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that we immediately just said to ourselves that there's no way for us to sort of try to imagine what it's like for the people in Ukraine at the moment. I mean, we're in our living rooms, you know, and safe. So what we thought we would do was to talk about what's happening here and maybe find a way to relate to what's happening there. They're not equal, but it does involve sort of artists responding to what's happening in their communities and the crisis. We're not at war here like they are over there. No bombs are falling on us, but our people are in danger. Our communities are in danger. So we want to talk about that. And the jumping off point, I think, first of all, that poem was written based on that photograph that appeared I think in a newspaper from Ukraine, showing school children trying to study in the middle of all the bombs falling on them. And that's the response of another student from another country. But we had just finished a production of The Chinese Lady at the Public, which is sort of an account of the first woman. Go back. There's a first woman, Chinese, first female to land in the United States in 1834, and then the subsequent things that she saw and experienced all the way to the end of the century. And a lot of that included the Anti-Chinese Exclusion Act and violence against the Chinese community. And so part of what we did was we convened public forums and invited the Asian American communities to come and attend these things, to talk about how they're feeling given the current moment. As you know, in the United States and even in New York, the incidence of violence against Asians has been on the rise, specifically unleashed by our great President Donald Trump when he attributed the virus to the Chinese and to Asian peoples. That unleashed a torrent of violence against Asians in the United States. And it has just grown exponentially, actually. And recently, communities of color in Sunset Park were attacked. So all of this is sort of compounded, but I think Nancy, for example, was key in organizing these community forums and bringing consultants and experts to help our audiences sort of react to that. But yeah, I'm gonna ask Nancy to talk about those forums and what they've meant.
Yeah, Ralph brought me on to the Chinese Lady to help reach out to our community. And as he said, right now, specifically in New York City, there's like a 300% increase in violence against Asian American Pacific Islanders. And our community feels very scared and very unheard and alone. And there is a sense of hopelessness for the AAPI community in New York City right now. And when Ralph brought me on, he said that he really wanted to create not a talk back for the shows, but a space and a forum. And he was very clear several times that he didn't want hosts or moderators to come in and tell people how they should feel. He didn't want it to be prescriptive. He wanted us to create a space that was safe for people to share how they're feeling. And so, we did that, and we brought great hosts in who are on the ground doing the work, doing trainings in de-escalation and situational awareness, and who are working directly with communities impacted. And so we were able to do 4 forums, and we were very moved by the fact that we were actually able to make that space where the audience was talking to us, and the audience was using the opportunity to say how scared they were and how alone they felt, and saying things that maybe they weren't saying to their friends and family. And it was really an honor for us to be able to create that. And, I've said to Ralph that, so Ralph has, Mai has created a standalone series separate from the shows to do these forums in other spaces across the city to help other theaters serve their AAPI constituents. And we also want to try to help other other fields reach out and make safe spaces. And, we were kind of debriefing and talking about the future. And it's kind of obvious, but I felt that the reason that the forums were successful was not even because of how we formatted it, but because of the Chinese lady, because of the work, because of the way the work made people feel. And it was really the perfect segue for people to understand their connection to history and how that connects to the moment that we're in now. And it was really, a confluence of factors that helped us touch the community and for the community to touch us as well.
I'm going to ask you a little bit to tell me what happened with Dash, your son, and what he said. Arts function.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. So my son is 6, and because because of how things are, he has had to come with me to the forums in the evening. He's attended all the forums. He's seen the Chinese lady, and he's also here, so he might say something when he hears me saying this. But there was a shooting, as Ralph mentioned, on the subway recently in Sunset Park, and the shooter, he shot 33 bullets. He injured 10 people. And so Dashiell's school is close to the stop, in proximity to the stop. And so his school was in a soft lockdown. And we had to talk to the kids later about it because we knew they were going to hear it from older kids. And, I told Dash, and he said, okay, well, what happens if we see him on the street? And I said, well, we'll have to call the police. And he said, well, what if he sees us call the police? And I said, well, we're going to move and then call the police. And so he had very practical, very pragmatic questions, despite the violence that we were discussing. And, we went to bed and we woke up the next morning, and I was making him breakfast, getting him ready for school. And he was laying down on the couch, and I could hear him crying. And I asked him, what was wrong? What happened? And he told me that he was just thinking about an episode of his favorite show, Larva. And I asked him to describe the show to me, what the scene that he was talking about. And he said that all the friends got into boats and they were on the water. And no, but can I tell it the way I heard it? All the friends got into separate boats. Yes, all of the friends got into separate boats and they fell asleep, and they drifted apart. And when they woke up, they drifted apart. And when they looked behind them, they saw this beautiful sun. And Dash said that in his recollection that, it made him cry because of how beautiful that scene was. And I told him, that's what art is. That is what art is for. Art helps us access feelings that we don't have the ability to really directly connect to. And I thought that, it was, we've taken him to museums and shows and galleries his whole life. And I've always wondered, how to make him understand what art is for. And it was a Netflix show about maggots. that really, I'm going to mute myself.
Yeah. Thank you.
And do you have anything to say?
Yeah, well, to piggyback off that, I think not only the receivers of art, but we as artists, you know, we make art to express what we can't by other means. And I think at a time like this, when, you know, even making it to the theater safe and sound is uncertain, that it takes real bravery to keep doing that, to keep making our art. So as far as the question of what our role is, I think we stay in it while not knowing stuff, you know, not knowing how to help, how to respond, just because in making our art, we're saying, okay, we're here, we're still here. We don't know what we're doing. We can't assume we know how you feel, but we're here. And I think that's when art is, you know, serves its highest purpose.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. Jacob?
Absolutely. And I think that, you know, when we are looking to create art as artists, and when we find any sort of external stimulus that is maybe blocking us from giving our art to the people that we want to reach out to, we do have other options. And that as artists is reaching out to the community. That as artists is reaching out to our neighbors and saying, you know, checking in on our neighbors for whatever purpose, or reaching out with our art to our other neighbors and really cultivating that community somewhat as we have done with our community, but universally, to check in and say, are you okay? Do you need water? Do you need food? What is it that you need, and how can I help to provide that? And I think that, like what Ken was saying, we have our art to create based on our experiences at a given time. But when there is a time, there will be a time when sometimes you're not going to have the availability to profess that art or showcase that art and showcase the universal experience that we're feeling. And in that time, that's when community-driven experiences or community outreach is the next step to make sure that we as a community are being heard and being seen and being universally attributed to what is going on in the world.
Yeah. No, really, really, thank you. And I would like to point out again how what a radical statement in a way it is what Ralph said, and he really means it. You know, says our community, the first thing they need now is not theater. And this comes from a theater company that works together for 30 years, but they to think, what is our meaning? What is our purpose? How can we help best? And I just recently also went to a talk of Claire Bishop, a great art historian who looks at the history of art through theater, who said, yes, once Brecht showed the conflict on stage of Mother Courage, and you learned something by just not doing what she did. And people did activism on the street and said, let's organize communities as artists. But Black Lives Matter taught us people can organize, they don't need artists. But she said, what perhaps is the most significant things people can do now, also in the visual art world, is to give care. What you said, to take care, to check in, how are you, you know, and to provide and to create safe spaces. And yes, also do the art, but perhaps go back to a side of what art can provide that has been not neglected, but was not in the center of it, but something radically has shifted, and actually your work is in it. A question to Ralph. Ralph, you said, I'm going to talk about the Philippines later. Tell us a little bit, what parallels do you see between what's happening in Ukraine and your experience?
Well, during the martial law years, Marcos really cracked down on all the dissidents in tandem with US forces who were visiting. He was basically propped up by the United States. So he had military support, and they were bombing villages in the South because they wanted them to submit to government rule. There was a secession movement in the South saying we didn't want to be part of the Philippines. They were Muslim, and Philippines is a predominantly Catholic country, and they went to war, and they basically bombed those Muslim cities. And they did the very same thing around the country. If you were suspected of being a communist, for example, or communist sympathizer, you went to jail or you died. And at the time, I was a young student in theater. And again, the question was, what kind of theater do we do when all of this is happening in the country? In the university, they wanted us to do Shakespeare and Chekhov, but that didn't make sense to me and to my colleagues. So what we did was we went to the streets and to the villages, and we performed plays and skits that we wrote specifically about their conditions. And we used the Bawal technique, meaning they could intervene, they could shape how the story went. And it was in tandem with getting them supplies and all of that stuff. But that to me underscored the theater and art has to be useful. We have to be of use to people, and sometimes just performing doesn't cut it, especially when they're running away from bullets or hiding from bombs, which is what's happening in Ukraine. Clearly there are people there, but there are also artists there that are affected by this. And I know that, in times of calamity and in times of crisis and adversity, artists somehow rise to the occasion. This feeds the artist's imagination. They always come up with something that's relevant. And I know that's going to happen in Ukraine. It's probably already happening, if it wasn't happening maybe even before all of this started. But it's something that we want to support in any way we can, obviously coming from here. And if anyone is listening there and want to reach out to us, we're absolutely open to finding ways of helping with what we can. I think that's what we want to say with our 30 minutes, is that we want to be useful.
Yeah. That's quite a big statement. So really, thank you for that, and really also to remind us, that wars and things like bombing of the, villages in the south, of the Philippines with, U.S. support, as you pointed out, or the military support, giving the weapons. Nothing is black and white in this world. That what's right and wrong. Everybody who tells you this is right and this is wrong, definitely is black and white. People are lying to you. The world is complex. And one of the big things we are asked for is to live with contradictions, to, keep balance of things, and like in a dance, but really be on the side of justice, progressive justice, and to be on the right side of history. And I think artists always have been. What are plans? What is coming up we have a minute or two left. What is my planning?
Well, Nancy is doing a series of anti-Asian violence forums between now and December, and we're actually partnering with multiple theaters off Broadway to host these things. And then we are going to launch a new play in August about the Korean War and the legacy of colonialism and violence, but it's told through Korean fables and children's stories. That's going to be at La Mama. And then we have other plans in the fall, but we're not ready to announce. But we're back to live theater and digital programming, but also really half of all of our activities will be focused on taking care of our communities. And making space for them to feel safe and going to those communities, because not everybody can come to Manhattan, so we have to go to those places. I think that's part of our responsibility.
Yeah, what a radical act. So easy to say, but to say, what we now take care of our communities, we go to them, and just the place might not be in the center, but we see that as part of our vision, as our Gesamtkunstwerk of doing art is actually to do that reach out. So we come to the end of our segment. I really would like to thank you for responding so very, very early, for taking this so seriously. We had also some correspondence of what to do, for bringing your team on. And I think what you do is something every theater company that is presenting work and just is scrambling to get back. And so hopefully we can show the Michael Jackson video, and then it's a renaissance to go back instead of what perhaps is kind of a revolution or something turning around, doing something different, and you guys do. So thank you, and I hope.
And thank you, Frank, for organizing this thing. This is such a really important thing for our community to get behind and come together and say, we support